Hey guys, figured I'd come in and do a different video than normal. I figured I'd go through my notifications and maybe go through a few conversations that I've had. Over the years, I've had conversations with various people with different titles, such as, physicists and engineers, biologists, just everyday people, every different type of job you can imagine with different, knowledge, education, and and everything. So, but I want to get to the point that it's not so much the title and what you do for a living that counts. It's that how you understand the information, and if you can critically think and break it all down and constructive reason your way through it and actually be able to speak to it and have a conversation with others. So I figured I'd come in, like I said, show a few things. If you guys like this video, just let me know. Maybe I'll do more of it. I have quite a bit of time, and I enjoy doing it, speaking with people. Um, I've learned a lot over the years, and I've shared a lot over the years. And it's been for the most part, a positive experience. Sometimes you run into people that are just childish, and they try to play some sort of character assassination of a complete stranger game. They don't know anything about you yet. They have all these nasty things they can say about you. So the trolls, that's they get off on that stuff, trying to get a rise out of you. So with that, we'll go in here. I was on a video talking about the price of oil and gas and how nuclear is a option and all this, and people were talking about nuclear reactors, and this person was talking about how they live in Germany. Now Germany moved away from their nuclear program quite a few years ago, and I believe they are leading the way. It's just a conundrum that they have to depend on Russia and gas from there and all sorts of their neighbors for various powers. But holding all this back is not the technology. It all exists. It's the politicians and the corporations that are getting in the way, and the governments of the world that are getting in the way. Because if we actually did things right, and we all created our own power, which we all have the ability to do that now, 365 days a year, rain or shine, if it's windy or not, no matter what, we have the ability to cover 100% of our daily needs every day of the year without a nuclear reactor or a corporation producing power for us. It is available today. Today we can do that. And it would be the same price to make your own system as it would to pay a company for 20 years to have your own power. And then to top it off, you could sell your excess power back into the grid and make money from that. So it would pay itself off, and you would actually end up cheaper in the long run. So it exists. It's all is there. And this can occur in the vast majority of the areas on the planet. This whole conversation of, oh, you can only do that in certain areas and this and that. Well, if you can't do it in your area, then you need to move to another place where you can. We don't need to have nuclear reactors just because you don't want to move to an area where it's easily possible and plausible and people do it every day to create your own power. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and read through this. I may go off and show you a few things, but for the most part, I'm just going to try to read this and we'll get through this. So it isn't a super long video, okay? Because there's quite a bit here. It's not a whole lot. I've been through hundreds of comments, but I think we'll scroll real quick. There isn't a whole lot, and I probably won't read every one. Oh, this isn't just that comment. I goofed up. Sorry, I gotta go back here. There we go. I gotta see, there's 35 replies, so there isn't that many. Okay. Okay. So I'm not calling anybody out here. These people I have respect for. I don't disrespect any of them. I respect their opinions. And all I wanted to show is how these conversations go. Okay? I live in Germany, and nuclear power is the perfect example for my country's biggest weakness, irrational fear. The best part about this is that the German politicians seem to prefer complaining about the energy price instead of just reactivating nuclear power plants, while the taxpayer even has to pay for their maintenance even though we don't get a single kilowatt hour out of them. Laughing and crying. Please send help. And this person says, the problem is that we lump all nuclear power plants into one pot. A lot has happened in terms of technology in the last 30 years. The last German reactor is from 1989. Our reactors are old-timers. There are newer, smaller, safer, more efficient, cleaner reactors, and actually a lot of innovation happening as we speak. The idea of reactivating is populism, so it's if one factors in cost, time, and price per megawatt hour as a result of reactivating old nuclear power plants. That seems like the most uneconomic and unsafest way to renuclearize in the long run. Basically pushing billions into making a Volkswagen Golf 1 running again for a short lifespan instead of investing into a Tesla, to use a admittingly bad metaphor. Okay? This is where I come in. I said the issue is water solubility of radionuclides that then bond to the oxygen in the water that then evaporates under equilibrium conditions and flow around the planet. Nuclear reactors release normalized discharges, quote, of emissions that contain tritium, carbon-14, noble gases, iodine-131, particulates, and an other category. All the while, most of you think they are emission-free and carbon-free energy source. Just to have a nuclear reactor, international safety standards state that these reactors should not power themselves and must be fed two different forms of power, with off-site power that is primarily fossil fuel power stations and a backup generator that runs on diesel fuel. That is not carbon-free or even carbon neutral at that point, and for what? 10% of our global energy needs, of which we see 10% of power wasted every day around the world. It's nonsense and not about power and only about uranium daughter procurement. The worst part is how we built nuclear reactors and never turned them on because of some last minute vote. Well, that last minute vote is because the vote is whether to use public funds to finish the reactors. It's not that we just didn't turn them on. Is that they're not finished because the company didn't have enough funds to finish it. So this person says, Paul Mobley, nonsense. An individual reactor generally does not power its own cooling, but there is nothing wrong with a separate nuclear plant powering another and so on. And of course this has long been done in high-share nuclear countries like France with its 50 reactors, or Sweden, Ontario. Furthermore, small modular reactors designed and approved by the US NRC don't need independent grid powered cooling. They can shut down and cool with ambient and isolation. He says, and you discharge C14 every time you breathe out, along with every other animal, none of which is a hazard. Modern nuclear plants are entirely free of greenhouse gas emissions or any other environmental hazard, where a hazard is a toxin with a delivery mechanism large enough to concentrate the toxin in the body long enough to damage health. There are no commercial nuclear power hazards in the U.S. There are no commercial nuclear power hazards in the U.S., okay? So I say that is incorrect. Carbon-14 is released, which bonds to oxygen to form 14CO2, which is a greenhouse gas, and that is radioactive carbon dioxide. Carbon-14 is a beta emitter just like tritium, and while the external exposure is minimal, it is a different story internally. Surely you aren't trying to compare the amount of carbon-14 released from a breath of air versus 500 plus global nuclear reactors, are you? Right. And I specifically stated primarily powered by fossil fuels, of which globally the nuclear reactor fleet is mostly powered by fossil fuels. Let's not forget fossil fuel heavy equipment to mine it, their uranium, okay? Then trucks and ships burning fossil fuels to transport it to be processed at another processing facility, more than likely powered by fossil fuels, using chemical compounds and various other materials that were made using fossil fuels. And then when it's made into a fuel rod, it's then trucked to a reactor using more fossil fuels, and where most of you want to think nuclear power begins. Then after, it has to be cooled in cooling pools that have cooling pumps that are, again, primarily powered by fossil fuels, and then stored for how long? Right, using more fossil fuels. Nuclear power is free of greenhouse gases and hazards, you said? In what world do you live in where you really think that statement you made is true? Wake up. And I said, right, ambient isolation. I said, tell that to the condenser. All things look great on paper, but in practice, it's a much different story. Now I say that because NuScale's small modular reactor had an issue with the condenser, and it did not have a fail-safe. It didn't just shut down, okay? I said, let's talk about trisopedal fuel, okay? I said, how many layers and how many different types of carbon is used for that fuel? Do you know? And if you guys know anything about the pebble fuel, there's 3 different layers. The inner and the outer layer of carbon is the same, and then there's a middle layer of like a diamond type carbon that's used, and they layer the fuel. Like they'll use fuel and then they'll layer all that around it like a sphere, and it's a pebble. It's a very small pebble, and then they do that with a bunch of them. Okay. And then I say Krypton 85 is a noble greenhouse gas. Small modular reactors, dozens of which will be controlled from one single control room with many different designs and fuels used, all have their many flaws, of which NuScale showed the world those flaws that arise just when we think it's fail-safe. With them being of much smaller scale, they are more susceptible to natural disasters that would take them from where they are placed, causing the entire fail-safe idea to be completely false and not as advertised. Even at the size of a bus, can you think of any instances when a bus was caught in some sort of natural disaster? Did they stay where they started? Of course not. The entire reason for building the larger reactors wasn't just for more fuel to be used, but made them less susceptible to issues with Mother Nature because of the size and thickness of the walls. And then I reference fluoride salts and electronegative. Okay, fluorine salt. MSR, the molten salt reactor from the 1960s in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and wasn't really touched since in the US. You've probably been told everything from the politicians stopped thorium reactors to the military not wanting thorium because it couldn't be used for a bomb, which may be partly true, but it isn't the reason we don't use MSRs, which is the molten salt reactor. The publication released from Oak Ridge fully explains why the MSR program was halted immediately, and it wasn't due to the military or politicians. It was due to what's known as tellurium embrittlement of the Hastelloy due to the nickel in the alloy used to construct the reactor. In under 5 years, the entire vessel was brittle and couldn't be safely used any further, and was shelved because a specialized alloy had to be used, which would increase the cost drastically, making it an ignorant decision to develop and use a fleet of reactors that might not stay together for longer than a few years versus U-235 reactors with licenses for many decades. Okay, this is where we're going to go off. I'm going to show you a little something. Let's see. Let's go here. And we'll go here. Status of tellurium Hastelloy in studies in molten fluoride salts. Oak Ridge National Laboratory. Metals and Ceramics Divisions, 1977. Okay. Tellurium. Chromium, tellurium, uranium interaction experiment. Okay. This is easily found, guys. Easily found. Okay, just type in Oak Ridge MSR tellurium embrittlement, or even tellurium segregation. Let me show you this tellurium segregation here. Okay, this is tellurium segregation. This is what happens to the metal. Makes it brittle. Okay, breaks it down. Back to the comments if I could find them there. Okay. So where were we? We were talking about the MSRs. Okay, that's where we left off, right? Okay. And I say, besides these are the radionuclides and noble gases released normally, and why Indian Point, New York, not far from New York City, has over 65,000% above background levels of tritium under the site. Yes, tritium was thought not to be a hazard, either for a long time. They thought it simply just passed through the body within a month's time frame, of which now we know that isn't true, and it forms organically bound tritium inside the body and isn't harmless, even though it's considered one of the softest radionuclides. And internally, it still damages the genome. We know through recent studies it causes DNA strand breaks from that genome damage. We know it causes micronucleus formations, and they found that it increases cell necrosis and apoptosis, along with chromosal aberrations and various other phenomena, thus negatively affects human health. Do not tell me it isn't hazardous, because I know better than that nonsense. I know the physics, I know the math, and I know the biology, and its effects on humans and animals alike, because they made an actual concentration ratio formula specifically for animal bone. Did you know that? For soil and water as well. Different formulas for each. Any idea how those are calculated? It takes more than watching a few YouTube videos to be out here condoning the use of something. Petkow effect. Internal exposure. Tell me what the main disease or illness is that is caused by even low-dose, long-term internal exposure of ionizing radiation released from a nuclear power station. Cancer, right? But it isn't the only disease. You do know that, don't you? So tell me which cancers are specifically caused by ionizing radiations versus fossil fuels. Like, surely there is a list of names of people that died of cancer, and the cause of the cancers are placed on a list somewhere, aren't they? What's the procedure or test a doctor uses to tell their patient when he tells them they have cancer that gives them the ability to know what source caused it? Different radionuclides are absorbed into different parts of the body. where they are trapped and cause different cancers like bone, liver, kidneys, lungs, etc. You do understand that they don't have the ability to tell their patients, don't you, what specifically caused their cancer, or their autoimmune disease, or cardiovascular issue. So how could any death per kilowatt/terawatt hour analytic calculation be correct without the knowledge of all these deaths caused by diseases that no one on the planet can tell us what caused it? Okay, and then I come in and I do this sometimes to try to inform the people that I'm speaking with that I understand these things. And there's things that I've studied and took the time out of my life to understand. And most of the time, these people haven't. So I try to place some of this information, not only for that reason, but for other people that might read these threads and they can gain some of this information. Okay, then they can go look this stuff up themselves and then they can get both sides of the coin if they choose. Okay, so I write alpha nucleus particle, beta electron particle, and a gamma photon released at the end of both alpha and beta decay modes, which, if you watch my last few videos, you know why I made that video now. Okay. Neutron bombardment and boron along with water as the moderator. The inverse square law does not apply to extended sources of radiation. Sources: the Bureau of Standards, Volume 3, pages 81 to 82, 1907. Absorbed dose is calculated through 1. Range, electron volt. Number 2. Deposition through the range, the whole life release of the energy. How it releases it. Does it release it at the beginning of its whole life? Does it release it at the middle of its whole life? Or does it release it at the end of its whole life? Okay, number 3, area of irradiation. That's the inverse square law. Number 4, density of the means, like skin. How dense is your skin, muscle, fat, bone, etc. Okay. Then there's a REM-RAD conversion. The Schrodinger equation in quantum mechanics only works for hydrogen and does not properly work for multi-electron ions. 1 electron volt is equal to 1.602 times 10 to the negative 19 joules. Priestley-Taylor and evaporation equilibrium coefficients. Aufbau principle. Casimir effect. Van der Waals forces. Pauli exclusion principle. Townsend electron avalanche. Gamma attenuation. The list goes on and on. Yes, it's random physics and quantum mechanics, of which, if you know even a fraction of it, then you know I know exactly what I'm talking about. Nuclear power is by far the worst idea man has ever plagued this earth with. This person says, reciting random atomic physics constants and concepts without any coherent point, only to conclude with your own personal opinion, is a sure sign that you, in fact, don't know what you're talking about. Perhaps you did once, not now. For what it's worth, I'm a licensed professional engineer. You see, these people always give themselves away. Always. They can't help themselves. Their arrogance gets the best of them. Okay? That doesn't mean what I say here is automatically authoritative, but it does not mean I can say you are wasting your time trying to hand-wave your obsession into authority. So this is an obsession that I'm waving my hand into authority. I'm not trying to be authoritative. I'm plainly expressing factual information that this person doesn't know, obviously, because if they did know it, then they would have either challenged it or they would have agreed with me. But instead, they've tried to say I'm hand waving and being authoritative, which he's not being authoritative by telling me, I'm not correct. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so I say atomic physics constants and concepts. Okay, say without any coherent point. Yet I fully explained my points before that specific comment. That last comment was specifically what you said it was, and what I specifically said it was before you did. Yet you cannot speak to any of it being an engineer. So what? I am in fact an engineer as well, and even served in the U.S. Air Force, Spangdahlem, Germany. Your title means absolutely nothing, especially when you have yet to say one single technical word about any of it. I didn't just say atomic physics constants and concepts. Apparently, you don't know that these seemingly random things are all interconnected in some fashion and are not random, which is how I know you have no clue what you're talking about when it comes to nuclear physics. So that person didn't really comment too much after that until much later. Okay. So this person comes in and says, yeah, no, I agree with the previous person. Throwing in some random technical terms that have no association to the topic whatsoever does not, in fact, increase your credibility. Apart from that, both the statement that alpha, beta, and gamma, quote, particles, which gamma, it, it's, it is a particle and a wave, they think, okay, from the double slit experiment. But I digress. It's that's not part of it. Okay, ignoring the dualism here, he says. I didn't ignore it. Okay, and I'll explain that. Are products of alpha and beta decay modes, and that the Schrodinger equation only works for hydrogen is just pure and utter BS. For example, 3H undergoes beta decay to stable 3He, deuterium, an electron antineutrino, which, if you've seen my last few videos, you'll understand why that video was released. Okay? Which now we know a gamma is released at the end of both alpha and beta decay modes. Okay? And the Schrodinger equation is applicable to all atoms, ions, and molecules. The problem is just that it can get arbitrarily complex. So for systems with higher complexity than two particle hydrogen atoms, we need to use approximate solutions. Okay. And I said, yes, I said approximate solutions causes the conservation of energy to be invalid. Therefore, anything other than hydrogen uses an approximate solution, which causes the conservation of energy to be invalid. Kinetic energy, Coulomb energy, okay? As I stated, a gamma photon is released at the end of the alpha decay mode, and a gamma photon is released at the end of beta decay mode. I explained that both alpha and beta are particles and where those particles originate, and at no point did I either ignore or mention dualism, of which is yet another issue in of itself, but still never mentioned it, and is only an assumption you made. Arbitrarily complex. Arbitrarily, on the basis of a random choice or personal whim, which is exactly the issue I raised. You can't just pick random wave functions out of an infinite amount and then say it's a precise calculation. That is, quote, utter and pure BS. Then I quote, throwing in some random technical terms that have no association with the topic whatsoever. I says, okay, let's see. The inverse square law is used to calibrate and take measurements with a Geiger counter and various other radiation detection monitors. Associated. Obviously, how absorbed dose is calculated is associated. You can't talk about radionuclides or any other element, ion, or molecule without talking about the Schrodinger equation and the wave function associated. 1 electron volt is equal to 1.602 times 10 to the negative 19 joules. How does a mass spectrometer or a cyclotron work without the electron volt? Associated. Priestley-Taylor evaporation equilibrium coefficients. Water-soluble radionuclides that bond to the oxygen in the water and flow with the oxygen in the global water cycle. Associated, which is what I started this whole conversation with anyways. Aufbau principle. Again, you can't speak about radionuclides without talking about how electron shells are filled. Associated. The Casimir effect. A physical force acting on the macroscopic boundaries of a confined space. Now, where would that be associated with? Nuclear reactor. Okay. Van der Waals forces is a distance-dependent interaction between atoms and molecules. Now, how does radionuclides interact with molecules again? Any ideas? Associated. Pauli exclusion principle. No two electrons in the same orbital can have the same spin or have the same four quantum numbers. Which one is the electron again? Beta? Which one is the electron again? Was it beta? Associated. Townsend electron avalanche is an issue that a Geiger-Muller tube has, which is why they put quenching gas inside to keep that same electron from showing up twice. Associated. And gamma attenuation, a concept for approximate calculation of radiation shielding. Associated. Now, as you can see, every bit of it is associated with nuclear power and physics, which is the topic, and no random technical terms were used, as they are all associated with nuclear power in some way or fashion. You just didn't know. Then this fluffy hamster comes in and says, every country with a stable geological underground with no or very little risk of earthquakes should use nuclear power plants in order to be totally independent of Russian gas. It's a don't-brainer, really. But unfortunately, we keep voting on stupid politicians. And I say, hi, fluffy hamster. And I say, and what happens when the power goes out for an extended period of time by, say, a solar flare that knocks out power and fries the chips with an EMP at the L shell? What then? It's not just earthquakes that are an issue to a nuclear power station. Even human error is one of the largest factors of having a nuclear meltdown. I say, what is a no-brainer really is to understand that most of these reactors we have today were built during the Industrial Revolution when there was money being made everywhere and business was booming. Now those reactors are near the end of their usefulness. There isn't enough money to replace them, let alone build more than we have now. That only covers 10% of global energy needs, as it is. Look at Vogtle in Georgia, which are the last reactors built in the U.S. They came in way over budget and way past the opening date. This site would have never been finished by the company if the people of Georgia didn't bail them out while the CEOs and management have summer homes and million-dollar bank accounts. Nuclear power is the past, not the future, and has never been about power for the masses of this planet. It has always been about uranium dollar procurement and bread from war. There is no free lunch, and nuclear is no different. Corruption and all. So this person comes back, right? And he says, I referenced a SMR design. He says he's not interested in what you think I've been told and not interested in the MSR experiment. So he has no interest in what occurred in the past with MSR and why it was shelved. But yet he wants to condone the use of an MSR style of small modular reactor or a thorium reactor or other types of reactors, right? I says, of course not. Of course you're not interested because the cat is out of the bag now. And he says, yes, the horse has left the barn, that ship has sailed, the fat lady has sung. See, now when they can't debate the information, this is what it turns into, silly stuff. Okay? So I say, so I play along. I usually play along. I'm that kind of guy. I like to play along. When they want to play games, I play. So I says, that is correct. And while you stand there with nothing but statements such as that, the engineer has yet to say anything technical. And he quotes, nothing but statements such as that. You mean useless cliches just like yours? There's material on point above. Why even enter an energy discussion when you freely admit you're in complete denial of global warming caused by GHGs? It says, yes, exactly. Useless cliches, but mine comes after you have egg on your face and your foot in your mouth. Yes, we've all seen the points above, and like I pointed out in full technical detail, those points have been found wanting and are empty all the while you are still standing there with your in your hand. I told you I like to play along. If you're going to play that game, I'll play. So I quote him, why even enter an energy discussion when you freely admit you're in complete denial on global warming caused by GHG? Because this person, I also was in another thread under this video and got into the conversation. I seen somebody talking about, the ice caps melt and all that. So why enter an energy discussion? This is obviously because I know the information correctly and can actually speak to it all in full technical detail, of which you cannot, as you demonstrated up above. I can enter any discussion I choose and have my own views within that discussion. You have yet to demonstrate how those views on the factual information I freely share here are incorrect. As I demonstrated, your licensed engineering title doesn't mean you have knowledge on various fields that it takes to understand this entire topic, not just a small portion of it. Freely admit I'm in complete denial of global warming caused by GHG. When did I admit that greenhouse gases don't cause global warming? No, like what did I say specifically that led you to believe that I don't know that the factors of climate forcing are number one, solar forcing, number two, Milankovitch cycles, number three, albedo, number four, grading of Earth's axis, number five, greenhouse gases comprised of more than CO2. I say the issue is you're citing a data set of around 100 years and a hockey stick graph presented by scientists that have said this has never occurred in Earth's history. With a 100-year data set even, out of millions of years. At least sunspot numbers and solar forcing uses a data set of over 400 years that has been calculated by many scientists over the years. And the one that scored a 97% accuracy rating isn't a climate scientist, but actually one that studies the sun. Okay. Her name is Valentina Sarkova from Russia. She did the calculations, and she beat all their calculations from the last 400 years up until today with Earth's temperature and what the sun's done. 97% accuracy. Okay, guys? The global warming hysteria was started by Al Gore and the politicians, not actual real science. These corrupt politicians have used their cronies to do what they've done for the past few decades and make people believe there is some sort of runaway global warming occurring. Yet every single one of their predictions through the last few decades have been completely false. You're talking about, um, like, if we raise up a certain percentage of temperature, everything's going to collapse, or the coral reefs are bleached and they're all dying, and all these predictions that have been completely false. Okay, these climate scientists blamed a natural process completely on man without knowing any science about the sun's effects, and only name solar forcing as the only influence the sun has on Earth's climate. I fully proved that the sun affects Earth's climate more than just solar forcing, because other fields have been proving climate scientists wrong ever since the 90s. Now, in the other comment, I explained how muons increase um, cloud nucleation, and they increase magma intrusion, and which increases volcanic activity, which in turn releases sulfur and particulates, which in turn increases cloud nucleation, and those clouds are much brighter than normal clouds, so that adds to the albedo of the planet. So that's how the sun can affect the Earth's climate more than just the sun's rays and its temperature. Okay, so I say I fully prove it. Okay, yeah. So I say you obviously are a good parrot and will blindly repeat what you've been told. You've been proved as you proved yourself with the information you used above. Good luck in the future, Falstaff. And don't just move on to another conversation on YouTube talking the same nonsense you did here because you can get away with it elsewhere. You're incorrect about everything you've attempted to present here, and it's time that people stop doing what they want you to do for them, not yourself. Okay, guys, they want you out here parroting what they told you to say instead of you critically thinking and breaking it all down and actually asking questions. Okay, so Fluffy Hamster comes back, Fluffy, old Fluffy. Built during the Industrial Revolution. Are you serious? What Industrial Revolution? And time period are you talking about? Now, this person they liked their own comment. Okay, so immediately after I got this notification, I went and looked, and their comment was already liked. Okay, so I see, and this person says you can't prepare for everything, but you can prepare for the event that are most likely to happen, or we can go back to live like the Amish people. And I say, why is that the only two options? Either have nuclear power stations or live like the Amish. The problem is, for some reason, you think you need a corporation to provide you with power when you have everything you need to do it yourself, and not live like the Amish and without a single nuclear reactor. I say from 1950 to 2000s, the Industrial Revolution, when the real industry began with reactors, better vehicles, better assembly lines with machines, and computers came into the picture, and look how much money that's been made and spent during that time frame. Am I serious? Yes. I say I agree you can't prepare for everything, but I do not agree that you can prepare for the events that are most likely to happen, because then you're talking about probability at that point. The probabilistic mentality of the individual about their individual issue at hand can't be quantified by averages of a group of people. In most places of the world, you can produce your own power for the same exact cost as paying a corporation to do it and profit from it. The only difference is you sell your excess energy back to the grid for others to use 365 days a year, rain or shine, windy or calm. The issue is not cost or being able to prepare for events that cannot be prepared for when they haven't been thought of yet. The issue is global corporate and government corruption based on greed for money and power. That's the issue, and until people see that, then this is all this debating back and forth on, which is, wait, that's the issue, and until people see that, then all this debating back and forth on which is best null and void. It all means nothing until that factor is addressed properly. We all say it and see it in every country. Those in power are not doing what's right for the masses. No one can refute that. So why is that energy production isn't seen that way when the proof is all before us? We see how these corporations operate while they lobby representatives of those countries with money, legal bribery. So that's the last. Okay, so you guys can see how people think. They think in terms of their own energy needs, and they want power to their wall at any moment that they need it, 24/7, 365 days a year. Okay? To me, that's a bit selfish. To me. Now, I understand there's some people that need it, life support, and they need that power. Okay? But the vast majority of us, there are times where we could do without the power going to our wall or going to that thing that we have plugged in that's just barely soaking up power. And you don't even really get anything from it. You guys know what I'm talking about. There's tons of products like that. Tons of them. And we see that 10% of waste every day that occurs. And if we got rid of that waste, then we could simply get rid of nuclear power. And then we could work on what's left and trying to switch it over to better options. Like I say, nuclear power is not about power for the masses. It is about Uranium daughter procurement. You must understand that. We are talking about americium in smoke detectors. We're talking about cobalt 60 in high pressure gauges, yttrium 90, and many others for the medical field to fight cancers. Okay, and every reactor that uses U-235 as fuel produces plutonium, that 1% of plutonium. And that's not all that's produced and sent out throughout the world and sold. That's what this is all about. They're selling this stuff. They made a black market out of thin air, and they're selling it. They have been selling it for decades now. This is not about power to our walls, people. This is about them and their money and their greed. Wake up and open your eyes. These are the things I'm trying to teach you. I'm trying to show the flaws in the science. I'm not promoting the science. The science is flawed at every step of the way. And I've clearly shown it. If you go through my videos, you will see all the flaws I point out, whether I point them out verbally or not. I know the videos that I don't speak on and there's just music and there's something to read that a lot of people don't like because they have to read it themselves and come to their own conclusion without anybody else's opinion about it. You guys should start reading and get your own opinion about the languages used in these papers, because that's where they hide it. That's where they hide all this, is in the language and deep in the papers. Remember the papers? Deep within the papers. Sorry. Deep within these papers is the answers, right? Tellurium embrittlement of the Hazel alloy. Summary, conclusion, all that stuff. That's where you'll find it, where they tell you. And these people don't know this stuff. You can tell the vast majority of people that talk about thorium reactors have never heard about tellurium embrittlement. And the vast majority of them do not know that thorium isn't just thrown into a reactor. You have to breed it into thorium-239 that is then converted. Wait, hold on. Thorium-233, which is then converted into uranium-233, which is then fissile. Okay? So look at the specific temperatures. Okay? Temperatures are very important when talking about this. You'll run into people that talk about, oh, it's lower than 1,000, so it doesn't bother it. No, even at 700, okay? Which I don't know how much energy and heat you can get from anything less than that and make it really plausible to do, okay? So don't let people fool you. Start using this information in those debates. If you're out here doing the same thing I am, then use that information. Don't let them bully you. Don't let them bully you with physics and quantum mechanics and terminology and everything. You can spin it right back at them. Right? I do this as a tool to help you people. I do this as a tool to help my daughter, my granddaughter, and people I know, my fiance. Okay, I do these things to help people I know. And I hope it's appreciated. And I hope, when I'm dead and gone, that you know, it'll still be looked at by those that know me, and they'll understand who I am and what I'm trying to do here. The world is a bad place at this point. It's corrupt, it's full of bad people, hell bent on their less than 100 years on this planet to make it better than the next person's. They don't care what they got to do it. And you heard it from the physicist himself, Richard Muller. They can't make the decision if one death is negligible in the grand scheme of things. Is one death negligible? That blew me away. Would your death be negligible? Would their death to them be negligible? I don't think so. They only say that because they're making vast amounts of money and they're living life high on the hog right now, while they can. Ask them in a few decades how they feel then on their deathbeds. Yeah, after they've had grandkids and they're playing with them and they think about that stuff. You know, when my grandkid looks back on my life, I want her to know that I've been out here trying to fight the world and people with titles that most people run away from, while I stand strong, and I'll keep doing it. Hope you see. All right, guys. Bye.